What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to my review of Doom: The Dark Ages. Now, big thanks to Bethesda for the code. At this point, I have finished my campaign on Ultra Violence, which honestly felt like a pretty good sweet spot. But today I'm going to be sharing my experience with you after completing the game. We're going to be jumping into, I believe it's like mission 6, but it's a more open mission, so I'll be able to run around, fight a bunch of different demons, use the various weapons, and talk about my overall experience with the game. Now, in terms of spoilers, obviously you're going to see me using various weapons. A lot of that stuff has been shown off in trailers already, so I'm not going to be pulling out anything that's too crazy, and of course, we're not going to be talking about story spoilers or, any plot beats or anything like that. But with all that being said, let's jump in and get to some ripping and tearing. Now, when it comes to games, one of the first things I like to talk about is gameplay, and I think that's especially important with a game like Doom. Let's be honest, you're usually not going into Doom because you're interested in the expertly woven narrative that they've made. You're here for the high adrenaline, the speed, the blasting through demons, and, that's what we're going to talk about. And I do think they did a really good job here, but one of the biggest changes is what I want to talk about first, and that's the shield, because the shield is an integral part of the Doom Dark Ages experience. We're using it to solve puzzles like you saw right there. We're using it to block. We have a parry with the shield as well. Anything that is like a green projectile attack or a green melee attack we can parry. Parrying projectiles will send them back at the enemy in addition to giving you a bonus effect, and then parrying melee attacks can stagger an enemy, opening them up for more bullets. Besides that, we can also use the shield to block, but it's really not intended for blocking. Just to give an idea of this, like if I sit here and I hold the shield, you'll see that little green gauge down in the bottom left, and it's not going to last too long. I'll take like 4 hits roughly, and then it's going to break, and now the shield's broken and I got to wait for it to recharge. But that's not how we want to use the shield. What we want to do is Captain America toss that through a bunch of people, get it empowered, shoot up on that guy, bash him in the face, push back over to him to get a kill. And this is what I like about the shield here. Once you get down the shield, you are using this as a long-range engagement tool, as a fodder destruction tool, as a rushdown tool, and it really does feel good. But at the same time, we haven't had anything like this in the more recent entries of Doom, and I don't think we did in the past Dooms either. So I definitely think it's going to be interesting to see how people react to this. I know just talking to some other reviewers, there's some people that are like, I try to block and it doesn't work. Our shield keeps getting broken. And it's like, my brother, that's not what the shield's for. The shield's there to parry and then rush in for a beatdown. So I definitely think it's going to be a divisive point for a couple of people. Obviously, I'm a huge fan when it comes to parries, things like Souls and Sekiro. So the shield, I felt right at home playing with the shield. I'm just rushing in, just blasting through enemies, loving every second of it. But I do want to call it out because I think it's going to be quite divisive. Now, besides the shield, we do have a bunch of different upgrades. We obviously have all of our weapon upgrades. The shield has a whole slew of upgrades that it's going to be able to get, and runes that you can get later. I'm going to go ahead and equip those ones on. I'll let y'all discover the various upgrades on your own. But that's another really cool element, is as we successfully hit parries with the shield, we have different runes with different effects we can do. So right now, this one I really like for like AoE clearing. It just summons up these like little holy swords that are going to chase down enemies and do a lot of damage. So good damage, good AoE clear, solid all-around potential. It does not work on parrying melee attacks, however, which is one thing to keep in mind. Melee attacks will still stagger the target, allowing you to get in some extra damage in addition to weakening them a bit. But that's probably the biggest difference from the previous games. Is in the other Dooms, it was all about mobility. It was all just, you're running, you're moving, and you never stop moving. And now, I mean, that's still true here. We are still running and moving a lot. But at the same time, the shield gives us the opportunity to be aggressive in ways that we couldn't really be before. We're able to use it like that to pin down enemies if it's upgraded. We can use it to toss through fodder, as I mentioned, but probably my biggest thing is just being able to rush in on enemies and then use that as an engagement tool. Like, even just getting around the battlefield, you can do a lot of stuff with that shield. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna die. Wait, there's health over there. Boom. And then I'm shooting over and picking up health and ammo. And so in a sense, while the shield, to one extent, I think it does promote more defensive play because we have the parry. At the same time, I think it also opens things up in the capacity that it allows you to be even more aggressive than before, which is something that I really like. We also have a bunch of different melee weapons to choose from. Melee is a really big thing here. I have on one of the final melee weapons, which is just this big old honking mace, which, you know, obviously strength build for life over here. So that is what I'm a fan of. But all the melee weapons were a lot of fun. And one thing that I really liked is the various melee weapons and the various shield runes. All of them had different upgrades that had value in their own way. So just for example, while the base melee might seem like it's weak at first, it actually does like a lightning debuff on enemies when you get it fully leveled up, which can be really powerful. And then something like what I have right here, like it's going to be a lot slower, but when it hits, it's going to hit like a Mack truck ramming into the face of the enemy. So I'm sacrificing speed and I'm sacrificing multiple uses for just one big walloping hit that's like a mini nuke going off in the enemy's face. It's like the BFG of melee attacks, which is a lot of fun to me. But that's something that I really enjoyed here, you know, not just with the flexibility of the guns, but the flexibility with our shield and how we're going to upgrade that, the flexibility with the melee and choosing what melee we're going to use. And all in all, I think it comes together to create a gameplay package that is definitely really enjoyable. Now, one thing that I did not like about the gameplay, and this is a very, very minor gripe, but glory kills. For the most part, glory kills aren't really that much of a thing anymore. And just to clarify what I'm talking about, very few enemies are going to proc glory kills now. On our elite enemies, we're going to get one, but for the most part, a lot of the time, we're going to either do like a melee hit or we're going to do a shield bash. And that's definitely something that I think I missed from the other Dooms. Like, that was a big dude, and all I did was just bash him with my shield, you know? That's something that I miss. Like, take this guy. He's going to jump in. Just bash him with the melee. Bash him with the shield. And I think part of it is really just to kind of keep the flow of the combat as fast as it is, instead of spending an extended period of time going through this, like, you know, Hulkin animation finisher on every enemies. But regardless, I couldn't help but miss it because I feel like it's such a core part of the Doom experience. And once again, it's still there. Like, occasionally I'll jump up and I'll cut a dude in half with the chainsaw shield. But compared to previous Doom games, I would say I'm getting a glory kill maybe 1 in every 10 executes, whereas previously I feel like it was a lot higher, which, speaking of the shield execute, there's one for you. But like I said, once again, I don't think this really takes away from the gameplay all that much. It's just something that I'm like, man, I missed that. Those are cool. Moving on from the gameplay, though, and talking a little bit about the world design, I actually really like the world design here and how they mix things up. So we still have levels very similar to what we had in the other Doom, where they're more linear and you're getting all your various secrets as you make your way through the levels. But at the same time, we also have levels now that are a lot more open, like this one. The one I'm on, I want to say is probably the biggest level in the campaign, but this level took me about 2 hours to get through. And it's huge. I mean, just taking a look at the map here, you know, like there's stuff to find all over the place. That's a huge map for Doom, you know. It's like, and I don't want to say like, oh, it's open world, but like it's a big map. So you do have levels that are more linear. You do have levels that are more open. You also have levels that are a little bit more scripted, like the ones where you're going to be able to ride around on the Titan thing that they showed off in the trailers. But I think they did a good job of kind of splitting things up between those various gameplay elements, where it's like, you know, you might do a shorter level and then you're going to have a longer level, and then you might have a transition where, you know, you're battle your way over to an area, so you're going to use the Atlas for part of a level, then, or the Atlian, you're going to use the, you know, you're going to use the big ass mech for part of a level, and then you're going to get off the mech and you're going to continue fighting guys on foot. And, you know, typically I see something like that and I'm like, oh, here comes the gimmick level. But I actually ended up having a lot of fun with them, and I think they did a really good job of kind of how they spaced this stuff out to where it never felt, it never felt burdensome, if that makes sense. It was always like, oh, hell yeah, I'm getting to use this thing again. I'm going to mess some shit up with this. So all in all, really enjoyed the world design here. I think they did an awesome job in terms of mixing things up and really giving kind of a fresh feeling to a game where, you know, typically when I think Doom, especially 2016 and Eternal and kind of how those flowed, it was a lot more about like, I'm beelining through, like right now, you know, we're going through an area that's a lot more similar to like a dungeon, I guess you could call it. And there's still some stuff like this, but then there's the whole open world area. And I think that was a really good way and just a really nice way for them to mix things up. Talking briefly about the story, it's Doom. I mean, nobody is here to get like, you know, oh, the story in Doom is amazing. It's, you know, it's gonna win awards for how good the writing is. But I will say there are some really cool things in the story, and one that I kind of guessed based on some stuff that I uncovered early in the game. I was playing and I was like, like this is a very interesting thing to see. I wonder if we're gonna get XYZ soon. And then we got XYZ and I was like, this is awesome. So there is some cool stuff in the story that changes things up from the typical that I think people will enjoy. And there's definitely a really good setup for more potential games building off of the Dark Ages type thing they're doing, which personally I like this playstyle a lot. I think a big part of it is obviously I'm a whore for parries. So, you know, Doom with more parries, yeah, bro, sign me up. Let's keep doing that. But moving on from story, talking about the graphics, I think they did a good job on the graphics. You know, like if you really want to like crawl things down and look into individual details, this isn't really the time to discuss it, because we're actually, let's just come back to graphics because we're like inside one of the dungeons right now. I mean, but even then there's still a fair amount of detail going into the walls, the blood spatters, the bodies that are up, you know, random corpses that are impaled that you can just run through and the stuff collapses, the skulls that are stacked. I think it definitely fits the Doom aesthetic, and I think they did what they were trying to do really well here. So all in all, I'm a fan of the graphics and the visual design of the game. I know, like, in the outside world, when we get back out there, we'll talk about it in a second, but I think that there are some areas where the graphics and the visuals in particular aren't as, like, high fidelity as the rest of the world, but I also think it's important to keep in mind what we're talking about here, because it's Doom. You know, this isn't the kind of game where you're going to walk through the world and smell the grass and try to touch it, you know. Like, looking at various textures, you can see that some of the textures do look flat. I think this is especially the case when we get towards like vegetation, but once again, I'm more just calling this out because I think it's something that I want to get ahead of for people who are like, oh, this is what games look like in 2025. Like, bro, it's fucking Doom, all right? I'm not playing the game to look at trees. I'm playing the game to murder demons, and most of the time what you're seeing right now, like, this is the default speed. You know, we're not like, oh, this is so beautiful. We're, you know, we're cruising and we're murdering. And even then, for cruising and murdering, I think these look fine in terms of texture, fidelity, and details. Talking about the audio, as you could expect from Doom, also completely hits the mark. You know, the sound effects are crispy, the gushes of armor, the meatiness, clang and the crack of bones, all that is exactly what you would expect from Doom. Now, also on the note of audio, the music is actually one thing that I honestly thought I was going to love more. Now, to clarify here, I think Doom has just awesome soundtracks. I like industrial, I like metal, and I've always enjoyed the Doom soundtracks. And like the other Dooms, so enjoy the soundtrack here. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It's a good soundtrack. However, there weren't any bangers. There were a couple songs where I was like, all right, this one's getting going. It's building up. I'm starting to like this. But like, I think back to, like, you know, BFG Division and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, like, this is the, you know, I'm going for a squat max attempt. Like, you know, put on the Doom 2016 soundtrack. Let's fucking go. And there were like maybe 2 or 3 tracks that I got that, like, fuck yeah, let's go vibe from as I played this. And once again, to clarify, it's like the music wasn't bad, but I feel like it was, I don't know, it didn't have that Doom magic, if that makes sense. It's so hard to describe because, like, once again, it's not a bad soundtrack, but don't think it's as good as their previous soundtracks. I think that's probably the best way to put it. So I think that's a good way to describe it. Not bad, but I think it could have been better. Talking about length and price. Now, in terms of total length, my playthrough clocked in right around 25 hours, given this was a 100% style playthrough, going for, like, basically everything that I could find. So it's definitely going to take more than your average player that's just trying to get through the game. I think if your goal is to just play through the campaign and you're not worried about finding treasures and whatnot, I think you'll probably take, I guess, would be 15 to 20 hours. If you're the type of person that you're like, you know, I want 100%, I want all the secrets and all the resources, and I want to max out all of my upgrades, you're probably going to take closer to 25 to 30. And given this is just for one playthrough, the game obviously has multiple other difficulties, including difficulties like the permadeath. But so for a 25-hour playthrough, for me personally, that's like the sweet spot with a game. You know, it's not too long, doesn't overstay its welcome, but there's still plenty to jump in and experience. And especially with Doom, it's really easy to just jump in and be like, you know what? I think I just want to do like just some light ripping and tearing before lunch today, and just pick a mission and fly through it. I know my wife was asking about it, and I was like, yeah, let me show you what it looks like. And I went through one of the main missions, and I burned through it in like 6 minutes. You know, given I didn't need to get anything, I already knew the path, so I was just literally like rocketing my way through it, bashing through enemies. So you can go as fast or as slow as you want. But for a shooter, I mean, honestly, I think 25 hours is plenty. I think any more than that, I'd start to get fatigued. Now, price, on the other hand, I definitely think this one is a little bit of a more hot topic, and mainly because of regional pricing. So they are doing the $70, which is current AAA standard. They haven't adopted the 80 that we're starting to see pop up here and there yet. But that's only for USD. For whatever reason, the game is higher priced in a lot of other regions. I want to say that Europe is like 80 euros, which doesn't make sense because that's the equivalent of like 90 and change USD. So I'm really not sure what's going on with regional pricing for the game, but you know, it is what it is. That's one of those things where, you know, you got to decide if it's worth that much to you, I guess. But in terms of like the actual game and the quality of the game, I do think they did a really solid job here. Talking a little bit about bugs and performance. Performance was actually pretty solid for me. For the most part, I'd say I was around 120 FPS. We are playing with everything cranked up to ultra, as high as we can go. I did have on DLSS and I had on frame gen, just to show performance metrics for a little bit. I'll show with frame gen on and off as well. So you can see right now with the frame gen on, I'm sitting at 120, 130-ish FPS. Looks like it's kind of fighting to be around there. But yeah, so really, really smooth. And given once again on my rig, you can see it in the corner, but I'm on an i9 13900 KS, playing at 4K, 144 hertz, VSync off, ray tracing is on, HDR is off. And I am on the driver that was sent to me by Bethesda for the game. So this is the latest driver. And you know, it's on average, I'd say around 120 FPS with frame gen on, which I'm fine with that. To me, that's good performance. If I were to take frame gen off, DLSS and ray tracing, we can see we're right around high 70s, kind of tipping into 80. And this is definitely going to depend on the level. You can see on average, I'd say it's around 80. In the smaller levels, it would get upper 80s and kind of try nudging itself up into 90. Like I said, this is a particularly very, very large map compared to a lot of the other ones. But for me, I'm okay with that. You know, I got DLSS, I got ray tracing. I'm pumping out the graphics as high as I can get them to go. And you know, I'm also okay with frame gen. I know a lot of people aren't, but regardless, I'm able to frame gen. I'm able to get up to that like 120, and that's a metric I'm happy with. So, in terms of performance, I'm satisfied with it. Given obviously I'm on a high-end rig, so I don't know how this would work on lower-end rigs. But I've never been a big metrics guy. You know, that's what Digital Foundry's for. Talking about bugs, so I don't think I actually encountered any bugs, with the exception of one that I'm not sure if it was a bug or if I slipped myself into believing something happened. So well, let me pause and explain the situation here. So I had missed a optional objective for a level. I want to say I had 3 rubies currently, and I was like, oh, I got to go back into that level and finish that optional objective. And then I went in, I finished the objective, and then when it was done, I was like, okay, cool, I should have 4 rubies, but I didn't get 4 rubies. I'm pretty sure I still had 3, but I'm not 100% on that. I like went back through and I was looking at the episodes and I was like, maybe I upgraded. Maybe I already had it. I don't know. So it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not sure if the game didn't give me my reward for going back in, because when I went back in to do challenges, it's definitely important to note, I would go in, I would do the challenge, and then I would quit out of the mission after I got that 100% checkbox. So it very well could just be the case that it checked my challenge and then didn't give me a reward for it because I wasn't there to clean it. At the same time, I did have exactly enough upgrade mats at the end of the game to finish upgrading like every weapon and then some change. So regardless, it's not like it's a really huge concern. I have everything fully upgraded, and as you can see, I have 600 extra gold and then 5 extra rubies. So the game definitely does give you a little bit of wiggle room in terms of getting rewards and whatnot. But in terms of like actual bugs, like, you know, my character getting stuck or enemies that are undamageable or falling through level, I didn't have anything like that occur. In terms of crashes, I did have one level that was a little bit fucky. I had like 2 back-to-back crashes on it. And then besides that, I want to say I had like probably 2 crashes the entire playthrough. So for the most part, performance is very solid, I think. What are you doing? I also have a gun that shoots lasers. Oh. Bro's getting parried into oblivion. Who the fuck do you think you are, bro? I'm in here acting like he isn't fighting Sekiro man. But having talked about that, that kind of brings us up to one of our final points here. Final thoughts. And all in all, I like the game a lot. I think I usually go for a 5-point rating scale, but honestly, I would probably put this on a 10-point scale, and I would probably put this right at like a 9 out of 10. Because this is better than an 8 for me, but there are a couple minor things that I think keeps it from being 10 out of 10. Namely, like I said, I think that the lack of the, well, not lack, but, you know, the reduction in the glory kills, that's definitely something that I miss, and I get why they did it. I'm still like, man, I wish there were more glory kills. I really want more glory kills. And then the music, like, it's really weird to be like, you know, the music could have been better, but like, dude, it's Doom. I don't know anybody that's like, oh, I like Doom, but, you know, I always play with the soundtrack off. Like, no. One of the first things I did when I started this playthrough was I cranked music up as high as I could. And even then, I'm just like, yo, where are these fucking banger soundtracks that usually blow me away? I feel like it's good, but it's not as good as it could be. I know that sounds like a really weird fucking nitpicky thing, because I enjoyed the music. I feel like Doom, I don't know. I don't even know, was Mick Gordon the composer on this? Maybe they got a new composer and a new music team. Like, it's solid, it's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. That's something I'll be curious to see what other people say about the music, if they think it stacks up to the older Dooms or not. But regardless, I mean, game is still a blast. I enjoyed every second of playing it. You know, boss fights were good. The aggression that comes from this game with like tearing through enemies is an absolute blast. And I definitely would recommend it at the end of the day. So we're going to wrap things up there. As of now, the playthrough is finished, clocked in at 31 total episodes. Quite a few of those stretching up, kind of inching towards an hour as well. So pretty beefy playthrough that'll take us through to the end of the month. But either way, thanks for coming on by and checking it out. If you like what you see, let me know. And otherwise, I'll catch you next time.